Welcome to the SiteTuners webinar for Google Page Experience Update. Is your site ready? My name is Jeff Loquist. I'm the Director of Optimization here at SiteTuners, one of the Directors of Optimization. Give you a little background on me. I've been in the industry, the internet, I guess, industry since about 2005. Started writing copy as a truck driver, actually, and worked my way up to doing some SEO for a company, an e-commerce company. Got into PPC, started working with SiteTuners, actually. And then I started my own agency, Rougarou Studios, which is does SEO and pay-per-click. And then started working directly with SiteTuners in the last couple of years. So I have a vast experience with search engine optimization, pay-per-click, driving truck apparently, and other things. So I'm excited to be here and to discuss our topic for today. So today, what we're going to talk about is the Google Page Experience Update. So we're going to get into a few things. What is an algorithm? What's an update? Why do updates happen? What does that mean? Why is this update in particular different? Because it is. It's a unique kind of update that we don't see all the time, and it's exciting for us from the conversion rate standpoint, conversion optimization. And then what do you need to focus on to get your site ready? And then, at the end, we'll talk about how SiteTuners can probably help you. So again, let's start, what is an algorithm? So go figure out what an algorithm is. We have to go back to the old days. And I'm talking the old days, like early old days, 2000s, early 2000s, even in the 90s. The internet was kind of like the Old West. There was a lot happening. There wasn't a lot of regulation. Google was kind of a thing. They started, I think, in 1998, somewhere around there. Probably my date wrong there. But when that was the case, there was a lot of information. And they need to figure out a way to kind of make it easily accessible, because with all that information out there, finding what people needed was almost impossible. So they had to figure out a way to sort through it. So they had a lot of incarnations of how they're going to deal with that. Some of you probably heard about, like Google used to be called Backrub, and it had a lot to do with links and keyword stuffing. But basically what they had to do was even today, the search engines have to sort through hundreds of billions, not trillions of web pages. They have to index it into relevant, useful results and present those results in a useful way. You have to remember, Google's a business, and they're in the business of providing people information. And if they don't provide people accurate information, they'd go out of business. The same is true with Bing, with any of the search engines out there. If they're not giving you those results in the way that you need them, then that's their only job. They make money in a ton of different ways, but that's their job. If they're not doing that, what's the point, right? So you look at a ton of stuff. It's more than 200 factors. They look at things like query relevance, how many links are pointing to the page, the expertise of the source, location, settings, more than 200. So with all those factors, they had to figure out how to make things relevant for today. And people are constantly finding ways to try to circumvent and get around those things. So they started doing algorithm updates. So what is an algorithm update? It's evolution. It's the way that search engines evolve and make changes to make those results better for the end user. And in the beginning, and even in the recent past, a lot of crazy stuff happened, right? Like I said, it was kind of like the Old West. We're looking at cavemen here. But back when I started doing SEO, back in 2005, a lot of weird stuff going on. We just stuff the page with the right keywords. You go out and get a whole bunch of links. Some people would even buy a bunch of links, but you get all the rankings. Like, that's how you did it. Google even had a tag called the keyword tag. It still exists on a number of websites. You can find it. Don't use it, because the only thing it's good for now is letting the competition know what you're trying to do. But they had these things. You would stuff that that keyword tag with every word you're trying to rank for. You'd fill your page with a bunch of keywords. And so, you might, if you were selling barbecue grills, you'd write about how you have the best barbecue grills on the market, and your barbecue grills are the best barbecue grills, and they have barbecue grills that are gas grills, charcoal grills. You would do things like that. And then you'd, like I said, you get a whole bunch of links. And that's where you started getting into this whole idea of like white hat versus black hat. You got the white hat people that are over here saying, hey, we're going to do all the right things and let Google rank the way it should rank. And they have the black people over here that are trying to manipulate. The problem is that Google understands that conceptually, but all they do is they see people trying to game the system. Whether you're doing white hat stuff or black hat stuff, they see people making changes to their website, which is not a bad thing. You should optimize your website. But you can optimize, if everybody's optimizing for the same thing, Google has to figure out a way to make it more fair and make things help stand out, right? So they do algorithm updates. And this used to be about 500. This is even, back when you used to tell people, they made about 500 changes a year. But you can see over the course of the last few years, they've upped the ante on that because the amount of information out there is growing massively every single day. And in 2018, which is like the most recent I could find, 3,234 improvements. Most of these improvements, they go unnoticed. You never even know they happen. I think that's 10 a day, roughly, right? And you never even happen. Once in a while, though, they get kind of flashy. And that's what this update is. It's a big update. It's going to massively have an effect on results, and people are going to take notice. And this is happening sometime in June. So what makes this update different? In a nutshell, many updates involve factors that deal with query relevance. The majority of them. That's those things we're talking about, where they're talking about like search query relevance, links to a website, anchor text, things like that, where it's like, does the search query make sense for the intent of the user? A lot of updates happen with that way. The sun is setting on traditional search. You're gonna hear people talk about SEO is dead, quote unquote. SEO is not dead. When people say that, don't listen. SEO is evolving, as we said before, right? But the days of stuffing keywords, buying links, they're gone. Google is getting smarter as time goes on, and we have to evolve with those changes in that same way. So Google and the other search engines, they understand the key to a good user experience is, in fact, user experience. We can get a bunch of people, and you can bring your horse to water, but if they're not drinking, what's the point, right? You've got to give people the experience they're expecting when they come to a website and do those things that help them make decisions, because if they're leaving, it doesn't help anybody. So this update in particular has more of a focus on UX and design, more focus on user interactions and user satisfaction, and more focus on page speed and security. Things that Google can quantify. Before they can't really measure user satisfaction. They're not out there taking surveys. They do take some surveys, but they're not out there doing that on a mass scale. And surveys can be a little bit odd. People cannot always be truthful in those. But it can take into account things that indicate bad user experience. And it's done this in the past. Things like pogo sticking. If somebody's coming to a website and they leave right away, they bounce. Then they go back and they bounce. They go back and they bounce. That's called pogo sticking. If people are doing that, you're not providing the information they need. They look at things like slow page load speeds, mobile friendliness, safe browsing, security, HTTPS. Y'all remember when that was kind of a thing a couple of years ago? And now if your site's not secure, they give you a warning. And then they've also looked at like interstitials, no intrusive interstitials. Not saying no pop-ups. We're talking about irritating pop-ups. You come to a website, the first thing you see is a pop-up in your face. That is a bad user experience. That's one of those things you're looking at. This update in particular is taking it a step further. And they're looking at things that Google is calling the core web vitals. They're looking at page loading, page interactivity, and visual stability. So in loading, it's called largest content paint. And you can kind of see on this slide, it even shows you what you should be in as far as like the speed and the shift and everything. First input delay, and then cumulative layout shift. These core web vitals, they're scalable measurements that can serve as a proxy for good user experience that Google Spiders can actually crawl, measure, and understand. So it's not really just looking at only page load speed. It's looking at things that actually show to be a good user experience. And this is where it gets exciting from a CRO standpoint, from a developer standpoint, because it means that the goal is to make the site useful for the user. And that's a really good thing. So load speed, let's talk about that first. What is largest content paint, LCP? It's how quickly you can get that above the fold content to load, right? So when you land on the page and it takes a minute, maybe there's a video, maybe there's, you know, an image that takes a second to load. If that page, the top of the page does not load quickly, because that's what the user sees, we call that above the fold. If that doesn't load quickly, that's a bad experience. It's also known as felt page speed. And you can see that on a number of things, not just on the internet. If it feels like something's good, people see it as good, right? And a good largest content paint is under 2.5 seconds. You know, greater than equal to 4 seconds needs improvement. And then anything over 4 seconds, they consider that poor. The next thing we're talking about is first input delay, or FID. That's interactivity. So how quickly does a loaded page become interactive, right? This is super quick. Less than 100, greater than equal to 100 milliseconds is good. Greater or equal to 300 milliseconds needs improvement, and anything over 300 milliseconds is poor. This is things like if a user clicks on something that should be interactive, a button, a video, and it doesn't play, the button doesn't load, it doesn't do what they expect that to do, that's a bad experience. And those things have to be available for that user right away, right? And the last of the three is cumulative layout shift. And this is an interesting one. It's considered visual stability. So what it's trying to do is it's attempting to measure how stable the site is. So if you think about it, and we've all seen it. We've all been to a website and we go to click a button and it moves slightly because the page is still loading. Or they're trying to read a sentence and all of a sudden that content gets pushed down the page. That's the layout shift. That's that bad experience. Like I shouldn't have to scroll down a page if I'm already reading that stuff. It should load as I see it, especially on that above the fold content. So you can see, you know, greater than or equal to 0.1, that's that shift, good. Anything more than greater than or equal to 0.25 needs improvement. Anything greater or equal to 0.25, greater than 0.25 is poor. It should not, that stuff should not shift very much once that page is in front of the user, right? So with these things, what is it we actually need to focus on? Because anytime these updates happen, there could be any number of things that are happening, but we need to know what to actually do about those things, right? First off, before we get into those core web vitals, improve your mobile experience. This is a major thing. It's been a major thing, but with this update, it actually means a lot. As of now, about 54.8% of global traffic is mobile, right? You need to design for mobile devices. You need to optimize your navigation. Use big touch tappable targets on those mobile devices. Scale your images, smaller size images, and then actually use and add shortcuts for mobile users to help them get to where they need to easily. Optimizing for mobile and doing these things is actually going to have a major effect on these three elements, these core web vitals. And mobile's such a major factor now, we've got to improve mobile experience. Think mobile first. Google's been preaching it for the last couple of years. Do it, right? So then let's improve our page experience. You need to work on those big three: largest content paint, first input delay, and cumulative layout shift, right? So Google actually makes this really easy to find. I got a link in the slide here. You search for Google Page Speed Insights. They literally tell you, they give you a score and show you whether you pass or not. And we're being honest here. You know, we've been working on our site, SiteTuners. We're getting really close, but you can see even us, we don't pass because of largest content paint. It takes about 2.9 seconds for our site to load. The other things, we're looking really good, right? But that largest content paint we got to work on. Now, if you plug your site in, you're probably going to fail this. The beauty thing is you're not alone. Even the big major companies are still struggling to make this happen. Moz.com is a huge SEO company, right? They're still failing. They're close. They're really getting close to that content paint. And it seems to be that largest content paint, that loading things quickly above the fold, is where sites are struggling. So you need to make sure that those elements are smaller, that they load quickly, right? Because as this rolls out, Google's going to take these into a lot more account. The beauty thing is they literally tell you what to fix in this report. You plug your site into the Page Speed Insights report, you click on, click the button, it opens up, and they literally tell you what you need to fix. So for us, and we're working on this, defer off-screen images, lazy load off-screen images. Got some questions coming in. We can answer those here in a little bit. But yeah, those images, but it could be anything. Some of the big factors I see are images. Image size is huge, right? Make sure they're optimized for whether it's mobile or whether it's desktop. You may need to have separate, smaller images for mobile. I know parallax sites, responsive sites, they do work. They could cause some issues on mobile devices. It's still up in the air. It doesn't matter what you use, as long as you can get those numbers lower and you can get them under the thresholds, you're in a good space, right? And they don't have to be perfect. You don't have to be everything always in the green. Just get it as low as you can. That's going to be the big thing, the big factors here. Other things beside images are JavaScript codes, and any kind of unused codes. I see that a lot is sites that they have a lot of unused or dated JavaScript. Get that stuff off your site. Take it out. That's always a huge factor. And then third-party tracking. Any kind of third-party tracking code, if you're not using it, get it off. And Google's notorious about this. They preach about site speed. Google's code tends to be heavy. But there's not a whole lot we can do about that. It has to be there because we have to have analytics. We have to have, Tag Manager is a great tool, and it does help save space, but things get heavy. I would say anything you're not using, like if you're using heat mapping software, it's fine to use heat mapping software. It's good to use heat mapping software. But if you're not actively using heat mapping software, take it off your site when you're not using it, because that stuff can bog your site down a little bit. or lazy load things, like it says. So there's other things outside of this as well, right? And we call this in Louisiana, that's where I'm at, called a little lanyard, right? That little something extra. And there's always that little something extra that kind of comes in with these updates. It's kind of like Congress putting a bill through, right? They always add a little something to it. So the good thing is, and Google, this is straight from Google, from their developer blog from this month, content, great content, that's still the king. While all the components of page experience are important, we will rank pages with the best information overall, even if some aspects of a page experience are subpar. A good page experience doesn't override having great, relevant content. However, in cases where there are multiple pages that have similar content, page experience becomes much more important for the visibility of search. So, focus on great content. End this stuff. This is not an excuse not to focus on your core web vitals or page speed or your mobile experience. Because if you're putting out great content, chances are a competitor is too, right? And you can make better content, but I would err on the side of you're probably putting out as good of content as other people, and maybe not the greatest content in the world. Maybe it is, maybe it's not. Do great content and do these things, right? Help Google understand images and videos. Google Smart. They can see images. You can do a reverse image search at this time, right? But let's not leave it to chance as to what your image or video is about. Use informative image URLs. This is one thing I see people almost never do. You know, it's like /images /73962, right? .jpg. No, you know, use the appropriate URL for the image. If it's a dog, say it's a dog. Use the appropriate alt tags and title text. So there's a couple things that actually happen here. So alt tags, they help inform the search engine of what your stuff's about, right? And then the title text does the same thing, but it also pops up. So if I hover over an image on a website, it's that thing that pops up, right? And that helps people that, you know, maybe deaf or something like that. Like there's actually things with ADA compliance issues that can help. And then use related content around those images and videos that help people understand. This image, I actually have this for a reason. I put in confused cowboy, right? Because Google, let's not leave it to chance. And the alt tag for this image was Slim slightly confused as to how the earth he ended up so cute, right? I don't know, probably good genes. But it came up for confused cowboy because of that alt tag. And then let's not try to trick the search engines. So this is the final thing I'm gonna say on this. If a visitor comes to your site from an image search and the content is not in line, they're probably gonna bounce. And then you got pogo sticking, and then that's a problem, right? So use images that make sense for the content, use alt tags that make sense for the image related to the content. That way, when they show up in image search, somebody clicks on it, they're going to come to your website, it's going to make sense, and they're going to continue on with that. This one I love. As a CRO guy, this one I love. Use clear calls to action. If someone lands on your website and they're not sure what to do next, it's a bad user experience and they're likely going to leave, right? They make the page intent clear. Use consistent colors. Train people on your website about what buttons they should be using on, and use an informative or action-oriented words in the button text. Let people know exactly what to expect when they click on that button. If we can do those things, they're going to know exactly what to do, and you know it's going to help that bounce, which is going to help that pogo sticking, which is one of the factors that's involved in this, right? Because this is all about user experience. Let's make that user experience really, really good. You know, and finally, with this, focus on good user experience. That is the key to all this. And that's why I love this update. If you focus on good user experience and you focus on making things as easy as possible for people to find the information they're looking for, to take that next step and get that stuff to them as efficiently as possible. And that's where those core web vitals come in, right? It's one thing to have all that stuff for them, but let's get it to them efficiently. Get the largest content pane so the page loads quickly. First input delay. Don't make sure all our buttons are working almost instantaneously. Make sure that the videos play, not autoplay, but play when we click on that play button, right? Make all that stuff happen. And then make sure that those pages aren't shifting around on people and causing confusion. It's really this entire update, and the reason that we love this, the reason I love this, and the reason that not only is this good for SEO and good for user experience, but it's good from a conversion rate optimization standpoint, is this is all those things that will help your site perform. And that's where SiteTuners can help. We'd love to hear from you. This will be kind of the end of the main point of this webinar. So we can open up to any kind of questions and things like that. But, schedule a call with us. We'd be happy to take a look at your site, do a review, and, see how you can improve things, and maybe we can help as well. So I appreciate it. So I'll open up to some questions here. Let's see here. So Elaine asked, how do you deal with the fact that many of the issues are either theme or plugin related? How will pop-ups like get ebook, join email list be impacted by this? Are there other options? So Elaine, that's a great question, actually. And that is going to become sort of an issue. I'm hoping that some of the people out, some of the companies out there that are doing the themes, like I know we're talking about WordPress themes, we're talking about Shopify themes, even like a Squarespace or something like that. Those things can be heavy. The more plugins you use, the heavier they get, right? So I would hope that with this update that the companies that are making these themes and these platforms are going to be working on this, right? From a pop-up standpoint, it's really about, and you can actually see Google actually has you go out there and search like disruptive interstitial. Google actually has like some content out there about what this should look like. What they really don't want to happen is if you're talking about those full screen takeovers where it takes up the entire screen on a mobile device right away, or I pop on your website and the first thing I get is that pop-up to join your mailing list or get the ebook. Like it or not, those are bad user experiences. Nobody X's out of those. Take the time, slow those down. Let me look around, get acquainted with you. Let's become friends and then ask me for a favor, right? That's what this is talking about. And then on the mobile device, we might have to start shifting around how those pop-up happens, whether they're like a half screen takeover, they pop up from the bottom or the top. That's, it's going to take a little bit of shifting and testing, I would imagine. I kind of talked about the parallax stuff earlier, but yeah, parallax might be an issue with the image and text shifting as they scroll. But I think it's really more about that first, that first experience when people land on the page, right? I land on a page, I go to click a button and it moves. Like even a parallax site shouldn't be doing that. If it's doing that, it's a bad user experience. So another question we have here is, how much is page load speed attributed to a host site? How do we ensure it's not a hosting issue? So it's pretty technical. It's kind of getting in the weeds a little bit, but yes, there can be some page speed attributed to the host site, depending on their bandwidth. Are you hosted on a standalone account, or are you in a block of other sites where you're sharing those things, right? it might, if hosting is an issue for you, it might mean having to upgrade to a different hosting platform or a different level of hosting, because that can absolutely be an issue with site speed.